Now I welcome our next speaker and the last one of this session. I'm a little shocked by the title, Resistance is Futile. This is a quotation from Star Trek. Of course. So you experience an invasion of the Borg, actually. This I understood. Yes, I'm also Trekkie, so I know everything about that. So the subtitle is Illiberalism versus Liberalism from, global perspective. So welcome and thank you for coming.
Okay, excellent, great. Thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm very happy to be here. I am going to show some numbers, so that's going to be quite different than theology and other events. And I'm also not so optimistic in terms of resistance is futile and our ability to take those kind of global perspective that I will try to showcase. And I will also finish with a bit of a question about, who are we fighting against? Essentially, I'll divide the talk into two. So first we have the first one, the rise of the liberal world society. I'll show you some figures to speak for that. Oh, okay, sorry. Let me do this. I don't like to stand straight here. Okay, is that okay? Yep. Okay, great. What do I mean when I talk about world society? We'll get to it in a bit, but essentially an ensemble of organizations, of ideas, of culture that speak to the same language. It's a culture reconstruction on a global level. And we see it also before World War II, but mainly after, with establishment of organizations such as the UN, different UN organizations, the rise of international NGOs in the world, who basically help to spread ideas. And they all used to have Western culture and so on. So just a few examples to give you an indication of what I'm talking about. So this is human rights treaties. We see the bars, and I know the trend line is a bit thin. I realized it only after I created this figure. But this is basically state ratification of major human rights treaties. And we see that there are just more and more of those across time. So the idea of human rights became institutionalized in the world across time. So when we think about human rights as a major liberal script, we see that this is on the rise. We also see it with women's suffrage, right? This is to the left, you'll see 1980. The bottom, you can see the pointer. The bottom line is women, the upper line is men. Obviously, 140 years ago, in most countries around the world, none of those can vote, but women less so than men. And with time, more and more countries grant both men and women the right to vote until, reaching pretty much 100% 20 years ago. We also see it with women's rights. This is legislative quotes for women in parliament. Okay, so to the left, 1950, very, very few countries around the world had specific legislation quotes for women. With time, we see how there are more. Still, it's not perfect. This figure ended in 2004, about 57% of the countries in the world had such quotes supporting women's rights. Another major script of liberalism, right? Higher education. it's, again, important. We learn through education, we spread liberal ideas, we share knowledge, and this is number of students. Basically, this is students per 100,000 capita, and it's aggregated across different countries. And we see that the trend is getting more and more optimistic with time, right? From 19 until 2000, it's quite a big jump. So we see more and more of that. Also universities per country. This is basically a mean of the number of universities, the average number of universities in each country. Again, the line is very, very clear. So when we talk about the liberal order, the rise of liberalism and liberal democracy as principles, we see a lot of different evidence supporting this more optimistic side of the story, right? Everything is kind of going upward. Science, right? We are here in Bar-Ilan University. If you look at the logo of the university, right? It's the microscope. So this is essentially what we see here is the institutionalization of the idea of science as a major rationale of how we experience and act in the world. We act through a scientific way. So this is, we see the number of countries with a national science policy organization, the number of intergovernmental science organizations, and so on and so on. This is different measurements who basically show that with time, we have a greater institutional framework that supports science around the world. The environment, right? Everyone now, we see it with the hottest week on record. Obviously, it's an important issue of the liberal debate, the Green parties. So again, this is chapters of environmental INGO, international non-governmental organizations, national parks as another measurement, environmental impact assessment laws. All of those kind of were flat, and then somewhere in the 70s started to pick and take, going up. This is another visualization of the same issue. We see that the number of treaties, the number of ministries, the number of laws, everything that is to do with the environment is on the rise. We see it also with justice. This is from political science, Catherine Sitkin, with her book, The Justice Cascade. Essentially, there is a stronger framework of transitional justice in the world. This is just one of the figures from the book. We see prosecution years. So, this is domestic court, international court, foreign courts. It's another push. Now, obviously, there is the question, until now, I spoke mainly about, I was speaking mainly about the institutional framework, right? So we have international organizations, we have states who adopt treaties, sometimes they enact laws, so they behave accordingly, but does it affect the way that people think or act? So this is just an illustration about private environmental behaviors. It's a sample of different countries, and the plain simple answer is yes, people are behaving more environmentally. Okay, so across time, this is just a set of different countries. The pink line, the third from the bottom is Israel. So from quite a low score for environmental behavior, people are across time start to embrace a more environmental activity. This is from another project I'm involved with about believing women's rights in African countries. Essentially, what I want to show is, yes, across time, this is kind of full enactment, so fully support women's rights. It's increased. The blue is doesn't enact, so it doesn't follow women's rights. So the sheer decline, and the two middle categories are partial enactment. So women who embrace some elements of women's rights international scripts, but not all. So essentially, yes, we see that across time, women embrace those globally circulated ideas, liberal scripts. So just kind of to put it into perspective, so the idea is that there are multiple frames, international human rights, medicalization, there is also religion, that fit together. They come to form a world society, which is basically a mesh of professional INGOs, international organizations, such as the UN bodies and so on, which then put those ideas together, and then nation states embrace them, and then they follow down into citizens. But then, obviously, we all see the illiberal backlash. It's kind of complicated to think what to do with it, but essentially, by speaking about illiberalism, I want to point on mainly two streams. So we have populism on the one side, we have authoritarianism on the other, and illiberalism is the broader umbrella. It's the broad reaction to liberalism, to the liberal culture that was represented before. And the question is, how do we see it? How do we measure it on a global scale? If to put the Israeli case that we're seeing now with the government as part of that. So again, figures. Oh, sorry, okay, yeah, we'll do it later. So a few years ago, the government in Israel was debating, or actually enacting, a law, Chok Amutot, basically restricting funds, in foreign funds on NGOs, on non-profit organizations. What we see is that Israel is not alone. We see a wave of countries who embrace similar laws. Basically, there was a similar attempt now in Georgia, in Georgia, a few months ago, and others. The NGOs have to declare if they receive international funding. Sometimes it's about excessive taxing and so on. So this is on the rise around the world. We also see it with LGBT rights. So on the left side, the left panel tell us the optimistic story. Yes, across time, we see more and more laws embraced by countries that provide LGBT rights. Okay, so hate crime protection, employment discrimination banned, and so on and so on. The right side, the right panel, panel B, show us the not so good picture. We're seeing marriage ban, that's the blue line, and we also see propaganda and morality laws, which are increasing across countries in the world. Okay, so we have a liberal side of the story, and we also have an illiberal side of the story going simultaneously. If we spoke before about the massive rise in the number of students in universities, this is basically showing us that across the world, there are more and more countries that experience a year-by-year decline in student enrollment to universities. Okay, so basically, if in 1 year they had 1,000 students, and the following year there were 900 students. Okay, so rather than climbing up, now there is a bit of decline. So you see the line is kind of high, it go down around 2005, but since then it's picking up, and we see more and more countries around the world with decline in student enrollment. Something that I'm sure is dear to everyone in the room, academic freedom. Okay, this is basically plotting the same idea. So we see more and more countries around the world. The percent of countries that are experiencing a decline in academic freedom is on the rise. And this is also something that dear to a lot of us. So the percentage, the share of countries that see a decline in judicial independence is on the rise. So from around flat of 10% of countries around the world that had some sort of a drop in their rating of judicial independence, suddenly now in recent years, it's up to nearly 40%, 35% of countries had some sort of a backslide in their ranking and of how their court compared. The question is obviously what explains it, what's staying behind this, which is obviously not a very easy thing to isolate. But those are basically, to me, from an institutional perspective, this is the crux of the issue. On the left, we see INGO membership. INGO membership is your go-to-go measurement of embeddedness in the liberal world society. Okay? So the more INGO, international non-governmental organizations that you have in a country, the more likely you are to embrace liberal ideas, supporting human rights, increased education, women's rights, environmental policies, and so on and so on. And what we see that, yes, this is quite true. And the two lines, the blue and the red, the blue is basically countries that are members of illiberals, IGOs. We'll talk about that in a minute. And the red is non-members of illiberal IGOs. What does it mean? It basically means a simple thing. If you are a not member of illiberal IGOs, we'll talk about that, then the more closely embedded in the liberal world, in the more INGOs that you have, the more international non-governmental organizations that you have, the more likely you are to be protected from judicial independence. You're not going to cut down on the independence of the court. Okay? It's also true for high number. If you have a lot of strong embeddedness in the liberal side, then it kind of protects you also if you are a member of the illiberal IGO. Okay? So on the right, now would be 5 minutes, right? More or less? 5 minutes, great. On the right hand, it shows the effect of the post-liberal period. So essentially after 2008, the economic recession, the 10 years that we see Orban, Holland, and so on. So if you are a state that is a non-member of illiberal IGO, your odds of restrictions on the judiciary remain the same. It doesn't affect you. But if you're a member in the illiberal IGO club, then your chances to impose restrictions on the court increase. So basically, we see that around 2008, the world is divided into stronger liberal and stronger illiberal poles. What are those IGOs, or illiberal international, and it should be intergovernmental, I don't know why it's international, sorry, intragovernmental organization. Basically, those are membership associations. Those are regional associations that are similar to the UN, but obviously on a much smaller scale, and they provide an opportunity for countries to share and exchange ideas. And those are just simply slightly different than those that were promoted in the liberal order. So we see the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, we see the Commonwealth of Independent States, which replaced the Warsaw Treaty Organization. So basically memberships that were related to countries in the what used to be Eastern Bloc, right? USSR, and so on. We see the League of Arab States or the Gulf Cooperation Council. So essentially membership, the fact that states are members in those organizations help us to explain and predict the trend. It helps us to explain the adaptation of, restrictions on foreign funding. It helps us to explain adaptation of legislations against and going against LGBT rights. The same thing with student enrollment and academic freedom. And the case that I'm working on it specifically right now is with judicial independence. And I think, I think I'll leave this one. I'll just say briefly, Israel is obviously posing a challenging case, right? Because it's not a member of any of those organizations. And as I said before, if you think about the world society as made of two, of a liberal world society and an illiberal world society, and kind of the way that we can assess it is through membership, then we have to ask ourselves, membership in what, given these things that are not as clear-cut as they are right now. So this orange is kind of the rise of NGOs in Google Newsgram. So how popular the term is. And the turquoise down below is think tanks. And think tanks are basically another form of associations that until now were relatively under the radar in terms of way or institution that can spread ideas. And we can definitely see that they grow and became more and more significant. And it's also about sharing ideas internationally, which is obviously going to be next. Thank you.